right, hello, and thank you for joining us for today's session on setting up your Jamf Now account. My name is Veronica, and I'll be taking you through this session today. In this session, we'll be covering how to create and activate your Jamf Now account, how to link your Apple accounts to ensure Jamf Now is able to communicate with your devices over the air. Then we'll talk in detail about Apple Business Manager, a free program offered by Apple, and really offers the best experience for you in your long-term management of your Apple devices. Once we've set up our account, I'll walk you through the other elements of Jamf Now, including blueprints for all of your settings and apps, and the enrollment process once you're ready to start adding devices to Jamf Now. And before we get started, let's quickly cover off on Jamf Now. Jamf Now is an Apple device management tool that allows different types of organizations to easily manage their Apple hardware so they can focus less of their time troubleshooting technology issues and focus more of their time on growing their business. Jamf Now was built to simplify device management and make it easy to use. So if you don't have a dedicated IT team, you can still leverage the power of Apple devices at work with the staff that you have available to you, since we know that this would be considered an extra responsibility to their day-to-day jobs. First, we'll go ahead and sign up for Jamf Now at signup.jamfnow.com. You'll fill in details like your name, company name, email, and password, and how you heard about us. Be sure to double check the spelling of your email before submitting to make sure you're able to receive your activation email. Within a few minutes, you'll receive an email that looks a little like this. If you aren't seeing the email come through, it could be because the email was automatically filtered into your spam folder, or if your email service is set up to automatically block certain email addresses, you might not be receiving it at all. If that's the case, you can work with your email provider or change the settings yourself to add any @jamfnow.com emails to an allow list for your email server. Once you receive the email, simply click Activate Your Account, and this will take you to a sign-in page to confirm the credentials you use to sign up. Once you're in, there's a few Apple accounts that we'll want to add to make your management journey a simple one. Now, there are 3 core Apple accounts that should be used with Jamf Now. One is required, called Apple Push Notification Service, or APNS for short. The other 2 are highly recommended as they make managing your Apple devices with Jamf Now much easier than not using them. Let's first talk about APNS. Apple Push Notification Service is a free program offered by Apple. It basically allows Jamf Now to communicate with your Apple devices over the air through a secure channel to ensure any tasks we're asking devices to complete are coming from a trusted source, in this case, Jamf Now. To sign up for the service, you can follow the steps within your Jamf Now account by clicking the APNS tab on the left-hand side of your screen, or by navigating to identity.apple.com. It's very important to make note of the email that you've used to create your APNS certificate for Jamf Now, since this will need to be updated once a year, every year. And Jamf Now will give you the opportunity to record which email you use, so no worries. But if at any point you forget the email, please be aware that changing the APNS certificate may cause your devices to unenroll from Jamf Now, so it's best to keep a record of the original email that you used to avoid issues in the future. Next, let's talk in some detail about the benefits of using Apple Business Manager, which is a free program offered by Apple. There are 3 main functions of Apple Business Manager where you can manage roles and give different permissions to different staff based on their job functions, manage content for all the different apps your organization might use, and manage device assignments. In order to sign up for Apple Business Manager, you'll need a Dun & Bradstreet number, or DUNS number for short. This number can take from 7 to 10 business days to receive, so please take that into account when you think about your timeline. That's if you don't already have a DUNS number. At this point, you'll be able to sign up for Apple Business Manager at business.apple.com. And then you'll click Enroll Now towards the bottom of the window pane. You'll then be prompted to enter some company information, including that DUNS number. It's important to note that approval for Apple Business Manager can take anywhere from 3 to 5 business days, so another consideration for your deployment timeline. The last thing you'll need to have to ensure you can properly import your purchased devices into Apple Business Manager for use with Jamf Now is your vendor-provided customer number. Whether you purchase your devices from an authorized Apple reseller, your carrier, or from Apple themselves, your devices must be associated with your Apple Business Manager account at the time of purchase. So it's always good to have your Apple Business Manager account up and running before completing your purchase with your vendor. They'll be able to provide you with their reseller number or customer number so your devices show up in Apple Business Manager for assignment. Before we continue, it's important to talk about the benefits of Apple Business Manager, considering there are quite a few steps to get this completed, so you know exactly why it's highly recommended. We talked about two main benefits of Apple Business Manager. The first being automated device enrollment, which offers three main benefits and make ongoing management much simpler than not having it. The first is out-of-the-box enrollment, which means a device will automatically be added to Jamf Now right out of the box as soon as the device is connected to Wi-Fi. This is great because you would have the option to ship devices directly to your employees and offices no matter where they are. And you can trust that Jamf Now will automatically configure these devices once they reach the home screen. No other steps needed from you as the administrator. Another amazing benefit for automated device enrollment is the fact that devices will be added to Jamf Now with a non-removable MDM profile, which basically means that no matter how tech-savvy your users are, they'll never be able to disassociate your corporate-owned devices from your Jamf Now account. Even if those devices are wiped clean and reset, they'll simply re-enroll themselves once they hit a Wi-Fi network, just like when they were turned on for the first time. The last major benefit here is wireless supervision. And let's talk a little bit about what supervision is. Supervision basically means that Apple will recognize a device as corporate owned and not personally owned. So it belongs to Jamf and not to me, which allows for a higher level of management capability that would otherwise not be manageable for features that would be considered consumer level features. And what exactly does that mean? Here are some examples of features you'll be able to manage on supervised devices. Being able to push operating system software updates over the air using Jamf Now is one example, so you can make sure your users are always on the most up-to-date software. Activation lock is a feature that protects a lost or stolen device that has an Apple ID associated to it. So if a device is ever wiped clean, the original Apple ID and password will be required to use that device again. That's great for me as a consumer, but quite a challenge in a business setting. And with supervision, Jamf Now actually generates a bypass code that allows you to remove a previous employee's Apple ID from the device so you can reassign that device to another user. No need to know that email or password of that previous user. The next feature is lost mode. This is similar to Find My iPhone, but in a business setting. For supervised devices, Jamf Now will have the ability to place a lost or stolen device in lost mode, which will lock that device down so no one can access any of the information on that device, with the option to display a custom message like, "Please call this number if found." Jamf Now will also track the device's location, given that it's still connected to a network. And once found, you can lift lost mode so your user can get back into their found device. The last few examples are of specific features and restrictions, like being able to remove the App Store from devices so users only have access to business critical apps that you make available to them through Jamf Now. Or if you'd like to limit use of a personal Apple ID or a personal email account, that's a restriction you can use on supervised devices. With supervision, single app mode allows you to lock a device into a single app for kiosk mode, or you can change the wallpaper of your iOS devices with that supervision mode. It's important to note that software updates with Jamf Now do require Apple Business Manager. So another reason that Apple Business Manager is useful for your organization and highly, highly recommended. Now, if you already have devices out in the field and you would like to bring them into Apple Business Manager, you certainly can, but it requires quite a few steps. First, you'll need a physical Mac and download a free app from the Mac App Store called Apple Configurator. You would then need to collect the devices that you'd like to bring into Apple Business Manager and physically connect them to that Mac with Apple Configurator. There's a list of steps to follow, which are outlined at the Jamf Now Help Center, but it's important to know that these devices will be wiped entirely of their data and will need to be configured as new devices. There's also a 30-day provisional period where that device's Apple Business Manager status is removable for up to 30 days before it's permanently added to Apple Business Manager. And at that point, the MDM profile becomes unremovable after those 30 days. Last thing to note, this process is only available to iOS devices today, but Apple announced earlier this year a process is coming to be able to do the same for Macs. So a bit more complicated, but still possible, especially for devices that were donated, for example, and weren't purchased by your organization. Though, if you know that you'd like to take advantage of some of the features that we discussed, it will likely make your life much easier to work with your vendor upfront to ensure your purchases are added to Apple Business Manager at time of purchase, so you don't need to leverage this workflow at all. The other program included with Apple Business Manager is volume purchasing. This is the one central location you can manage all of your business apps. There are a few key reasons volume purchasing will make deployment much simpler. The first is something called managed distribution, which allows you to maintain ownership over your apps and gives you the ability to assign apps to users. This way, a user doesn't need to purchase an app using their personal Apple ID with a personal credit card and get reimbursed by your company, but then they walk away with that app if and when they ever leave the company. In the instance where you do have employees leaving, volume purchasing allows you to recall those apps and easily reassign them to new employees as they get onboarded. This makes it super simple and cost effective, so there's no need to overbuy licenses of apps if you know exactly how many you need. Not only that, but with volume purchasing, there's one single place you need to go to buy your apps, making it easier for your accounting purposes. Lastly, managed distribution gives you a few options for assigning those applications. You can assign apps to an employee's personal Apple ID, a managed Apple ID that you create in Apple Business Manager, or directly to the device with no need to create Apple IDs at all, saving you a ton of time and giving you the flexibility to manage your apps based on the many different use cases that may exist in your business. So now let's take a look at how we get these programs added to Jamf Now. I've already signed up for my Jamf Now account, and so I'm able to log in using that email and password that I used to sign up. And you can see here that I don't have any devices, I don't have any accounts set up quite yet. So the first one I'm going to do is APNS, or Apple Push Notification Certificates. So I'm going to download something from Jamf Now, and then I'm going to hit next. And I can click here to go to the certificates portal, but I've already got it open here, so I'm going to head right over there. And I've already logged in with my Apple ID. You can see it up here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create a Certificate. I'm going to add a few notes here so I know exactly what I'm using this certificate for. And then I'm going to find the file that I just downloaded from Jamf Now. And it should end in .plist. And then I'm going to click Upload. And there we go. So I know that this was successful with my confirmation check. The next thing I need to do is hit Download on this. And I'm going to head back to my Jamf Now account and hit next. I'm going to take that and drag it right into my Jamf Now window. Perfect. So here's the opportunity that you can take to note which Apple ID you used. And here I have a typo, so let me go ahead and head back. This way you know that this is the email address you used, and every year that you have to update this, you're going to use the right email address. So I'm going to hit save, and now that's embedded into my Jamf Now account. Perfect. So I've got my APNS certificate uploaded. All right, and the next step that we'll complete here is automated device enrollment. So I'm going to click Get Started and then hit Next. I'm actually going to take something from Jamf Now, similar to what we did with APNS. Then I'm going to head to Apple Business Manager. I'm already signed in here, so what I'll do is head to Settings, click on Device Management Settings, and then I'm going to add an MDM server. We're going to title this JNUC 2021. Then I'm going to choose the file that we just downloaded. And then I'm going to hit Save down at the bottom. Perfect. So now I've got my MDM server set. What I'll do next is download the token to give back to Jamf Now. So let's hit Next. And then I'm going to drag this right into my window. Perfect. So at this time, you can choose which setup assistant steps you want to skip or keep. We'll skip this option for now. And now I can see that my Apple Business Manager has been connected. The last step we'll do is connect our volume purchasing account. So I'll hit Get Started. I'm going to use that same Apple Business Manager account. This one works a little different because I only need to take something from Apple Business Manager to give to Jamf Now. So I'm going to head to Settings, and then Apps and Books is where I'll be able to find my volume purchasing token. I go ahead and click Download for the appropriate location. You might have one or you might have many, depending on your business. But then I'll head back to Jamf Now and add that token. All right, you can select your country. Perfect. And so this gives you an option to record which one you used. Good. So now I've got all of my accounts added. There's one important step that you need to complete before you start enrolling devices. Depending on how you'll start enrolling, auto enrollment is how we want to do it. But if you have devices that aren't added to Apple Business Manager, you can enable open enrollment. This allows you to add devices to Jamf Now using a link. It's important to note that devices enrolled in this way won't be supervised, so just know that those differences exist. So once we have our devices added, you turn on your devices and they should automatically be added to Jamf Now. What we'll do before turning on those devices is create our blueprints. So once we've added applications through Apple Business Manager, I'll be able to add those here through blueprints. You can also configure a whole bunch of other things, including web clips, which kind of acts as an app on the home screen, so you don't have to navigate to a web page all the time. You've got security options where you can require passwords, minimum lengths, as well as passcode history. You can configure email accounts. So if you're using Exchange, you can easily add that mail server information. So all your users need to know is their email and password to get it configured to the device. Similar with Wi-Fi, so if you want to add your office networks, you can add that here. That way you don't need to physically share passwords with your end users. These devices will automatically connect to those Wi-Fi networks. Then you've got over 75 different restrictions available to you with Jamf Now. You can decide if you want to remove the App Store, if you want to disable other native features within that device. You've got app usage options, so if you only want to allow specific apps, you certainly can. We've got a ton of security options, like disabling the ability for someone to wipe a device clean locally on the device. Then we also have some options here for iCloud. So depending on how those devices are being used, you can disable some of those features. You can also delay software updates, for example. So if you're using an application that might not be compatible day one with Apple operating systems, you can at least give yourself a 30 to 90 day buffer to make sure that those apps are updated appropriately. Single app mode is where we can turn on that kiosk mode. And then you have the option to upload a wallpaper here for supervised devices. So that's what we've got for setting up our account. The most important pieces here are around Apple push notification, Apple Business Manager, making sure that those things are all added. Once you've gotten started with your Jamf Now account, you might need some additional help or you have some questions. We do have a help center at docs.jamf.com/Jamf Now. That way you can access everything specific to Jamf Now. In your Jamf Now account, at the bottom left corner, you can also access live chat support. So if you need some help or are experiencing issues and need some troubleshooting help, they can certainly help. And for any questions around Apple Business Manager, you can head to support.apple.com/business. So thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of JNUC. Thank you.